Hey guys, this coming Sunday we're going to begin a new sermon series on First Peter. It actually is one of our options in the lectionary, and I think the lectionary gives us 6 weeks to focus on it. However, First Peter is a dense and beautiful and deeply theological letter, and so 6 weeks is not nearly enough time. For that reason, I'd like to supplement my Sunday homilies with some brief instruction in points that I could really go into great depth in during Sunday services, but I won't have a chance to. And so I want to begin today by making a few comments on the word apostle. First Peter actually begins this way. This is First Peter chapter 1, verse 1, and it's actually just 1a. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. That's how the letter starts. And many of you guys have read the whole New Testament. I'm sure most of you have, in one way or another, because you've been in church for a while. Because of that, you know that most of the epistles in the New Testament begin just like this, or at least they begin in a way very similar to this. In fact, almost all of Paul's letters begin with this kind of self-designation. Paul begins by claiming his apostleship. In fact, he either begins by saying, Paul, an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ, or as in Romans, he'll say, Paul, a servant and an apostle. Now, those are really the two sort of primary sort of titles that New Testament letter writers take, either apostle or servant. And so what should that tell us? Well, it tells us some really important things. It means, first of all, that Peter, just like Paul, is claiming to speak not for himself, but for someone else. Because the word apostle comes from the Greek apostolos, and it means simply messenger. Or you might say it means ambassador, although I like messenger better, because not only is Peter claiming to speak for someone else, but he's also claiming that the message he brings is not his own message. It was actually authored by someone else. And so this is a kind of self-designation that Peter is making, which is really humble. He's saying, I am merely a messenger. I come on behalf of Jesus Christ, bringing a word from him. Now, there are all kinds of implications with this. If Peter's apostolicity means anything for us, it means that we are a community who are sort of enlivened by this word, which is not Peter's word, but also comes from Jesus Christ. And so it means that we are an apostolic people, meaning that our place is not to make something up. We are not the ones who get to sort of invest this letter with meaning. The meaning comes from Christ. We are merely to receive it, and then we are to treasure it. We're to protect it. We're to do our best to understand it. And then we are to, of course, share it with the world. And actually, if you go further, here in 1 Peter chapter 1, he says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who are elect, exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. And so he refers to the church as the elect exiles. First of all, elect means that we have been chosen. We're not sort of volunteers here. And then exiles means that we are people who live in a country, yet we don't belong to it. Where do we belong? Well, we belong to the kingdom of heaven, which is, of course, where Jesus Christ reigns. We are his people. And not only that, but he calls us the dispersion. We are exiles of the dispersion. Now, this is a word which sort of should bring to mind for us diaspora. The Jews, when they were taken out of Jerusalem and scattered about to Assyria and Persia and all over the sort of known world of their day, they were called the diaspora, which is a word which essentially means something like seeds. And so whenever Peter here refers to the church as the dispersion, The image that this message conveys is that these are people who are not in their homeland, who are subject to an authority which is coming from somewhere else. That is the authority of Jesus Christ. They are merely to receive this message and then to obey the one who conveys it. But then, more than that, they are the diaspora, meaning that though they are in a foreign land, they are to be sowing seeds in this foreign land. And the seed that they are to be sowing, of course, is this message which they are receiving. And so it's a powerful, powerful image here. And it has all kinds of implications for us, as I've already mentioned. We live today, if we are evangelicals, in a world where we are accustomed to innovation. In fact, I became an Anglican for many reasons. One of the reasons that I became an Anglican was because I was just so exasperated with the never-ending innovation that you see among evangelicals. In fact, if you think back over the last 20 years or so, then you may know that evangelical leaders and evangelical publishing houses have come up with program after program after program, which is supposed to sort of save us all. And so we had, for instance, the emergent church movement. We had the missional church movement. We had the simple church movement. We had vertical church. We've had organic church. We have had, well, on and on and on and on, okay? And these are just the movements who have church in the name. There have been many, many others. And every one of these movements is promised to us as some innovative way that we are going to finally get our act together and get really effective in ministry. Well, compare that to the message of Peter here. Peter says, I'm a guy who doesn't have anything original to say whatsoever. I just come bearing the message that I have been given, and I entrust it to you. In the mid-19th century, Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, wrote a little essay called The Difference Between a Genius and an Apostle. And in that essay, he says, a genius is someone who has his own message, and he's most likely ahead of his time. In fact, he may be 50 years, 100 years ahead of his time. However, there is going to come a time when society at large catches up to the genius, and his message will be ultimately assimilated and will simply be a part of the culture that has finally evolved. An apostle, however, according to Kierkegaard, is someone who comes not bearing any new message whatsoever, but bearing a very old and ancient message, which he has not himself come up with. And yet, just like the message of that genius, the message of the apostle will seem extraordinarily new. However, the general culture will never catch up to the message of the apostle. In every single generation, that message, which is very old and unoriginal, will always be new and will always stand over against the culture, no matter what age you are in, because it represents a different kingdom, a different dimension altogether.